It's 4 o'clock on a Monday. You know what that means. It's time for another exciting episode of Taxi TV Live. Woo! This week, starring special guest, Mr. Steve Winogradsky. Yeah!
Hello, America.
And hello, Steve.
Michael, nice to see you.
Good to see you. Thank you, fake audience. Thank you.
Thank you, fake music.
Yes, exactly. So I want to rectify something. I said in the email that I sent out to you guys that Steve is not only a music attorney, but he owns a music library. And that is true kind of, but not entirely. So let me open the chat room so we can see our friends in there. All right. Steve is a partner in a company with another old friend of mine named Ron Sobel, and the company is Winogradsky Sobel, and they have now shifted away from being a music library. So you don't send them any music because they're not pitching music anymore. They are now doing music rights management type of stuff.
Right, more music business, songwriter deals, legal work. Ron and I are both attorneys, publishing, clearances, licensing in all media. And trying to keep ahead of the curve on digital.
But not pitching.
Not pitching.
Okay. So, wow, Sobel has a law degree. He actually passed the bar.
I know. We're all a little shocked by that.
No, actually, I've met you probably 20 years ago through John Brahaney, I think. And Ron I knew back when he was at ASCAP. That was
25 years ago.
Holy crap, I'm old. So anyway.
Then why do I have all the gray hair?
I don't dye mine. I've got to say, people always say you look remarkably young. I am 60 years old and...
I'm only 27. What the hell happened here?
You've been in the music industry. That's what happened.
That's it.
Steve is also the author of a book that you really should have, which is called Music Publishing, The Complete Guide. It's been out for like 3 years?
About a year and a half, actually.
Year and a half, okay. Extremely comprehensive. You can find it's published by Alfred Publishing. You can find it on Amazon. And, you know, we get asked questions every day here at Taxi from people that have music publishing questions. And you teach music publishing.
I do teach music publishing. I teach at UCLA Extension. I've taught there for 18 years. And also a couple of years ago, Cal State Northridge started a Master's in Music Business program, which I teach their music publishing class as well as do a lot of lecturing around the country at various schools and various seminars.
And the Road Rally.
Which
Yes,
I'm
absolutely.
happy to say I've been invited to several times.
Yes, and you will continue to be invited several more times. So we're going to talk about all things publishing. We will talk about library stuff. And then I'm going to open the floor to you guys at some point for Q&A. And yes, we will listen to a song during this episode like we always do. But I'm not going to start out listening to this song. Let's see. So let's talk about probably the most frequent question we get, which I know for you is very rudimentary, and we've got people in our audience that are very advanced, people in the audience that are less advanced. So can you explain the difference between a non-exclusive deal and an exclusive deal? This would be in the context of production music libraries, film and TV publishers.
Basically, an exclusive deal means that one company, you've given one company and that one company only the right to pitch your material and license it out. Typically, this is a situation where you've got a unique body of music that you perhaps are not licensing on your own, that you're not really exploiting in some ways. Some people prefer to do non-exclusive deals, which means that they will give their music to several different parties. And that can be problematic. One reason is because sometimes when that happens, the concept of retitling comes into play.
Right, and explain that.
Retitling is where the different party that you give the music to will give it a different title. For example, your song is titled ABC, you're the writer, and it's your publishing company. You give it to another company to pitch, and they retitle it. They call it XYZ. Mm-hmm. You're still the writer, so you still get the writer's share of royalties from the performing rights organization, but now they get the publisher's share. They put it under their publishing. And so if you have more than one person out there pitching, especially in a retitling situation, you can run into problems because the production companies don't always know who they get the music from.
Or whom to pay.
And that's the real problem. They will get 3 or 4 different copies of the same track. They will decide it's a track that they like, and they're not sure who to license it from or who to pay.
Mm-hmm.
And so that causes problems in a number of different levels because sometimes if they can't figure out who to pay, they just drop the track. And so it's an
Right.
opportunity loss for everybody. The other thing for retitling is that now with digital recognition technologies, all these tracks come with metadata. And in effect, the digital recognition technology looks at the music and looks for its digital fingerprint, a particular wave that it generates. And it's unique to every song and more importantly, unique to every recording.
So if you had the same recording put in 4 different libraries under different titles, but yet the audio was exactly the same, it's going to show up the same and
It's
won't
going to
know
show
who
up,
to get paid.
and again, it won't show up who gets paid. And again, if the performing rights organizations get claims from 2 parties on the same song, they'll hold the money until the parties resolve it.
And how would they resolve it? By a timestamp showing who got it for or who pitched
Could
it
be
first?
could be a timestamp. Could be that someone has an exclusive. Someone has a deal with a production company that another party doesn't have.
Okay.
For example, if my library has a deal with Entertainment Tonight, and your library doesn't, and it shows up on Entertainment Tonight, they probably got it from me. But if your track shows up in the digital technology, you're going to contact Entertainment Tonight and say, "How come you're using my track without a license?" And they'll go, "I got a license from Steve." And then you and I are in a battle,
Right.
and Entertainment Tonight doesn't want to be in the middle of this battle.
And so they could quit using both
They
of our
stop
libraries.
using both of our libraries. Exactly.
Now, all that said, the issue seemed to be much more prevalent and more hotly debated 2 years ago. Seems to have simmered down a little bit, and we see cases where libraries that before were just non-exclusive have now started an exclusive side, preparing for the future.
Not only exclusive, a lot of people have stopped retitling.
Yes. And we've seen libraries that were exclusive also adding non-exclusive parts of their catalog. And the reason is many of the exclusive libraries, it used to be in the old music library business that if you were a composer, I would pay you anywhere between, let's say, $200 and $1,000 for a track that you create for my library, my catalog. Usually I would hire you to do a group, maybe 10 or 12 or 15 songs in a certain genre, maybe, let's say, Latin instrumental stuff.
Yes.
And that's a buyout. So now I, as the library, the publisher, I'm buying the master rights and I'm buying the copyright, and you retain the writer's share.
That's correct.
And all of a sudden, over the last few years, a lot of libraries started coming to Taxi and other entities as well, saying, we want the exclusive rights, where we're the only library that's got it, but we're not paying anything up front. And I remember Adam Whites was our vice president for a year or two, and he would not run a listing where somebody wanted to lock something up exclusively and not pay for that right up front. Well, as time has marched on, because there's such a plethora of music, more and more companies are going, hey, there's all this music out there, and we can do this. We can get away with not paying anything up front and asking for exclusive rights. We've noticed that our members are less likely to submit to exclusive listings than they are to listings that request or offer non-exclusive deals, because the members apparently want to spread their music around to several catalogs. Is it going to come down to everybody in the industry is going to want exclusive deals and not pay anything up front?
I don't know if they'll all come out to exclusive deals, but the other thing that can happen with an exclusive deal there's no money up front is maybe a more advantageous deal can be made. So, for example, the writer would collect the writer's share and maybe a portion of the publishing share or a portion of the license fees.
If you've got a leg to stand on.
But that's part of the negotiation. You know, it sweetens the deal for the creators and makes them more likely to submit music to an exclusive library because there's a little bigger payoff on the back end instead of the front end. And some of those deals can be made. I do know some libraries where the composers do get 50% of the publisher share of income.
But probably not until they've earned that strength of in the negotiation, because they've had stuff in the library and they've gotten a bunch of placements and the library wants to keep them on board. I would contend that a newbie who's doing a first-time deal with them, they're going to say, look, No, here's our standard deal. It's not
And that may
negotiable.
be. I mean, look, the sad truth about the music business is that it's all about negotiating leverage.
Right.
The more power you have, the more success you've had, the more power you have, and the better deal you're able to get. And
So,
that's why John Williams makes more than I do when he composes a film score.
yes, he does.
And it's John Williams' birthday, by the way.
It is happy
Happy
birthday,
birthday,
John.
John. We would sing to you, but we don't have a license.
So, all right. So, if you were a relatively new songwriter or composer, here's what I tell people, and I can't give out legal advice. Um, for instrumental cues that one, excuse me, that one can bang out kind of quickly.
Now that he's had a rock star, he's going to talk a lot faster, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes, well, they are the sponsor of the show, so I do drink Rockstar
Little
for every
product
show.
placement.
Yes,
Here at Taxi.
they
Excellent.
sponsor the Road Rally. They send us like pallets of this stuff.
I know, I've seen it. It's amazing.
So what's amazing is we've got like probably 3 pallets worth sitting out in the warehousey section of the office. Ooh, we're at that time of year where the sun is bathing me. Okay, getting back to the publishing and non-exclusive stuff. So I tell people, if I wrote a song that took me a very long time to write and a very long time to record and produce, and I put a lot of effort into the vocal, that's obviously a more precious commodity to me as a creator than might be a down and dirty solo piano piece that's going to be in the background of a
Right.
bar scene. I would be more inclined to not want to give away the exclusive right for no money up front for something that I invested a lot of time and effort to, um, versus something that I spent an hour or 2 or 3 on. I might go, yeah, you know what, I can make 5 of those this week.
You know, you're right. I mean, from an aesthetic point of view, that's exactly the position you want to take. But the practical realities are that there are lots of people doing this who will give their music away for free. Um, sometimes I speak to composer groups, people who are well educated as composers who have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on their education, hundreds of thousands of dollars on their composing gear. And what I tell them is this: you're in competition with a 12-year-old with a Casio and a Mac.
Yeah.
Because those people can create music. It may not be as good as yours. It may not sound as good as yours. To some people, it won't matter.
It's
If
usable.
they can get it cheaper,
Yeah.
they will use it. And so, unfortunately, especially in the music library business, it's a race to the bottom. People are giving away their music for free. Sometimes they are only getting back end and no upfront money.
Which would be from their performance royalties coming from ASCAP, BMI, or CSAC in America.
And sometimes they're getting a small amount of upfront money and giving away their back end and not getting any money from the performing rights organizations. And so it's a very competitive field. And my advice to young composers, for better or for worse,
Take up dentistry.
is take the gig.
Yeah.
Find a way to take the gig. Get your music out there in some fashion. If you've already invested all this time and money in your career and in equipment, to try to take the high road and not take a download deal is a waste of your education and a waste of your equipment. That's not the best legal advice I could give. That's not the best career advice I could give. It's the best practical advice I can give.
That makes
Somehow get your music out there, get your music used, start earning some money from it, and that will give you the leverage that you need to make the next deal a better deal.
And you and I have mutual friends, some of whom are taxi composers that you know outside of here. Maybe you've met them over the years at the Road Rally, and that's exactly what's happened. Is they started out the first year making $2,000, then $10,000, then $40,000, then $70,000, and now they're at that $100,000 to $200,000 a year level. We've got a couple of members,
And they can be more selective.
But the funny thing is, 2 of the guys have been on an episode of Taxi TV, and these guys almost always sign non-exclusive deals. Will take the same piece and put it in 5 libraries. They never bother to copyright any of their work, and yet they're making 6-figure incomes. So I can't say that doesn't work. And it's what they choose to do, and it's worked out really, really well for them. I know other people that would never dream of letting anything go for no money up front because they've created a real piece of work, for lack of a better description, have a lot invested in it, and the thing will probably never see the light of day.
Look, and it's also a qualitative matter of, we used to think of library music, and by the way, they don't like being called libraries anymore.
Right.
They're production music houses
Yes.
or custom music houses.
Or film and TV music licensing companies or
Yes.
firms.
Yes, where the quality of the music, the quality of the sound recording was crap.
Mm-hmm.
It was the early days of MIDI. Stuff didn't sound very well. There were no samples. Pro Tools hadn't been invented yet. It was not very good music.
Canned music.
And now,
even at its best, it still sounded canned.
Yeah, and it was interchangeable.
Mm-hmm.
All the production music libraries sounded the same because everyone was working with the same tools. Well, now it all sounds pretty good
Mm-hmm.
because everybody's working with the same tools.
Right.
So everyone's upified their game. You've got more computing power. You've got something like Pro Tools, which allows you to manipulate stuff in 100 different ways that I can't even begin to understand because I'm not a composer. You've got all these sample libraries that give you great sounds that you can emulate virtually any instrument on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
And if you know how to use them well and know how to use your equipment well, it's not easy to distinguish an electronic orchestra from an acoustic orchestra.
In the right hands.
In the right hands.
Yeah. We get people that will go buy the $1,000 string library but don't know how real string players think and how they touch their instruments and their intonation and where they would be placed in the aural spectrum, left to right, front to back. And it's obvious, even though it's a $1,000 library, it still doesn't sound great. And then you can take somebody with a $200 library that's really thought about this is what a string player would really do. This is how they would do their vibrato.
This is how they would bow. This is what the bowing sounded like. This is what the decay would sound like. Same thing with horns. Same thing with percussion.
Yeah.
Same thing with everything. I mean, you need to know a little bit of how each instrument is played in order to properly use it as a sample.
Yeah. Otherwise,
and without that, it's just pressing things on a keyboard and hoping the right sound comes out.
I meet a lot of musicians who are elated. I signed a song with a catalog. I got something into a library. They do cartwheels, and that is a milestone. It's a big deal because most of our members have never made a penny with their music. They don't live in Los Angeles, New York, or Nashville. They probably, I grew up in a little farm town in Illinois, and we got members from there. So now they're really connected to real people in the industry via the taxi listings, the road rally, what have you. They get their stuff signed, the ink dries, and then they sit there waiting for the phone to ring. That I got your stuff in a TV show, I got your stuff in a movie, and they are just crushed when a month later, 3 months later, 9 months later, nothing has happened. Can you give them some perspective on, once their music is in a library, why it takes so long before it gets used, if it ever does, and what they can realistically expect?
Well, one of the issues, not only with libraries but just with pop songs that people would pitch, is that the music supervisors at certain times of the year don't actually have time to listen to new music.
Right.
When they're in the middle of a television season, they're not listening to new music. So the first trick for anybody looking to get their music to a music supervisor is actually getting into the music supervisor's hands. Mm-hmm. Most of the libraries, most of the major companies that do this have some kind of web presence and have some kind of metadata and search engines, so that if a music supervisor is looking for a hard rock, guitar-driven song at 80 beats per minute with a male vocal and a great chorus, and believe me, those are only 7 or 8 parameters that they could type in. They could type it into a search engine, and songs that meet that criteria will pop up. So now they have access to them. They have to decide if that particular piece of music is going to match the scene for the program that they're actually working on.
And make the producer, who's probably making the ultimate decision, as you mentioned before, is it something he would like or relate to? Because it's not a matter of the supervisor's personal taste.
And the supervisor's job is to present alternatives. Mm-hmm. He will present 4 or 5 different choices to their production company, and then a decision is made by the person who's in charge, who may or may not really understand music.
Right. Or how music works with
or how
picture.
music works with picture. I used to work at Universal Pictures in the music department. And at Universal in the department, we used to have a saying that everyone who worked for Universal Pictures knew two things. They knew their own job and they knew music.
Mm-hmm.
Because everybody had a radio or a CD player or a cassette player in their car. And everybody would listen to music and go, that Springsteen boy has a lot of promise. How come we're not using his music?
Right.
And of course, the reason is that it's unavailable at the price the studios can afford,
Mm-hmm.
or there's other business decisions that they have no idea about. So you get producers, and this happens a lot also, with composers for TV and film, where the producer doesn't really speak a musical language, doesn't understand how music works, and the composer or the supervisor will get a note like this. Well, I wish the song could have been a little bit more green. Can you give me something with more green in it? And of course, nobody knows what that means, and even the producer doesn't know what it means.
Right.
Or, yeah, that's not it. Show me something else. No, that's not it. Show me something else. And 20 tracks later, it's like, still not it. What are you looking for? Well, I'll know it when I hear it.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's like the kiss of death.
We use the process of elimination around here when we find ourselves going down that path. It's like, well, then, so we could find you a country song? Oh no. Rap song? Oh no.
No.
So really, you're probably looking for something that sounds like a contemporary radio hit. Yeah. Okay, so do you want it more on the dancey pop side of radio hit, or do you want it more on the Ed Sheeran side?
Yeah, I
Ooh.
mean it's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
I've had people say to me, and this is the God's honest truth. I want something that sounds like the Beatles. Well, okay, are you talking early Beatles, mid-career Beatles, Sgt. Pepper Beatles, White Album Beatles, Abbey Road Beatles? Because they're all different.
Yeah.
Well, all this guy knows is he wants it to sound like the Beatles, and that's not really enough direction.
And the only clue that you might have is, let's say it's a period piece that takes place in 1968. You may lean toward,
Let It Be.
Right.
Yeah.
Whereas if it were 63 or 64, it'd be early Beatles.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, okay, so that's the reality that, from the library side. I think that a lot of musicians are very hopeful that when somebody signs a deal with their music, that the person who signed the deal with them on the industry side is then picking up the phone and calling 25 people a day going, guess what? I just signed this great new song from this great new writer. And really it just sits there until that happy intersection of somebody is able to articulate what it is they need, and the person who answers the phone remembers that your song answers that.
And sometimes it's not even that. Sometimes the people who sign it are not the people pitching it. They're not the ones receiving the calls from the production companies.
Great point.
Sometimes it's a completely different set of people. So the key is that it takes a while for the music to percolate into the supervisor's ears, and then they have to find an appropriate spot for it. And then it has to beat out 4 other songs that are all, I won't say equally good, but equally appropriate for that spot. And so it just takes time, and I know it's discouraging, and sometimes the deals that are made for certain networks, certain cable networks, there's no fee involved for licensing, and hopefully whoever controls the music can get something else out of the bargain, something like a Chiron or a website listing. But honest to God, you'll have someone who gets their music licensed for one of these shows, and the next thing they know, they're on the phone to their mother going, hey, Mom, I'm in show business. I got my song placed. By the way, can you send me $250 for rent this month?
Yep.
Because they're not seeing any money up front, and it will take them months to see any money, even from their performing rights societies.
Yeah.
And as most of you know, or hopefully you know, the performing rights societies pay approximately 6 to 9 months after the show is broadcast.
And that's if it's in the U.S. If it's outside the U.S., it could take 6 months or 9 months to get to
even longer
to the U.S. So then it can take another 6 or 9 months.
Yeah. If there's a sync licensing fee, it's usually paid within 30 to 60 days after the show is broadcast. That's pretty standard these days. It's almost never paid before the show is broadcast because shows are being edited up until the last minute and until the show is locked, which can be 2 days before air.
Yeah.
Or I've had experiences where a show was dubbed live as it was satellited to New York.
Wow.
Because they're still making decisions at the last minute. Until the show is actually locked and finished, your song's not being licensed. I've got a friend in the car business who says the deal's not done until the tail lights twinkle.
It makes sense.
Yeah. So it can take a while for the money to flow through on the front end, but even longer on the back end. So hopefully, someone is able to get a number of placements and they just keep rolling over. And so, you get a placement this month that pays in 9 months, you get a placement next month that pays in 10 months, you get something in month 3 that pays in 11 months, things like that. And it's the churn, it's the continuous use. But the other thing about production music libraries is that they have inroads and contacts with people that most artists and most composers don't have.
Right.
And that's kind of what you're paying for, in effect, when you're giving them your music.
Mm-hmm.
They know people, they get to people, they have deals with people that you as an indie artist wouldn't have.
Right.
And so that's part of the cachet of doing this.
And they get half the money for it.
Right.
And fair enough. Because on your own, you would have to spend 8 or 10 hours a day, every day for a year or 2 or 3, developing those relationships to have as many possibilities as they can bring to you.
And, if you're an indie artist without a lot of airplay or without a lot of sales, it's almost impossible to get in front of a music supervisor unless you go through somebody else for any number of reasons. One, they're familiar with the library or the pitching party. They don't want to get unsolicited music. You can't just send something to a supervisor unsolicited. You have to get an okay from them to do it because there's too many legal implications of them getting sent music. All of a sudden somebody pops out of the woodwork and says, hey, you stole my song.
Yeah.
So they want to get it from what they feel is a reputable source, a library, a publisher, a manager, an agent, a lawyer. You can't just send it off all by yourself. Or taxi. Exactly. This is what these guys do. I mean, with that, people in the industry know Taxi, and they know that Taxi has done a certain amount of research, a certain amount of vetting of the music they submit to make sure it's original, that the people who claim to own it actually own it, 100%,
or control it,
because we've had experiences where when we were pitching, because we used to do this. We pitched a song to a TV show. The show said they wanted to use it. They came back to us for a, medium price deal for what the license was. We went back to the artist. He goes, I might have had some co-writers on that.
Crap.
And I don't think I own the master.
Oh my God. And so you look like an idiot.
Well, and the co-writers and the master were owned by a major studio, a major label and major publisher who would not take the indie artist price. So we kind of looked like idiots. Luckily, it was somebody that we do business with on a regular basis, and we just kind of said, okay, we're sorry, our guy screwed up, we didn't pay attention close enough. We're sorry. Have I mentioned we're sorry?
Right. You'll get a second chance because of the relationship, where there's a lot of times it's just like, I can't call them anymore because I can't trust I'm not going to get my butt sued.
Exactly.
Because they weren't thorough enough in their due diligence.
Exactly. And this happens all the time where the production companies will get a call out of the blue from someone who claims to have rights in a song that they just put on the air.
Yeah. Or a bass player that co-wrote in the studio that day,
Yeah.
even if he's not on the copyright, but he felt that he was a co-writer. He goes to see a movie with his wife. He hears a song, goes, I'm a co-writer on that. That can be a problem.
Okay, just for the record, bass players are not co-writers.
Yeah. But he might think he
might
is.
think he is.
Yeah. Let's see what we haven't covered here. Let's talk about owning and controlling, because almost every one of our film and TV listings versus the record company listings will say you must own or control 100%. And people call us routinely and say, does that mean that I had to write 100% of it? And my answer to that is no, but you need to be able, you need to have the authority to pitch it.
Right. I
That,
mean, let's use a band situation where all the members of the band play on the record.
mhm.
Okay. We'll leave the composition side out for a moment. A lot of times bands will have a band agreement and it will say someone has the authority to make deals on behalf of the band. All too often, though, there are no such deals.
Right.
And so each member of the band owns a portion of that recording.
Mhm.
Now, if they all agree that the leader, whether he be the guitar player, the singer, the drummer, whoever,
Not the bass player.
not the bass player, has the authority to make deals on their behalf, then that party doesn't own everything, but he controls everything. He has the authority of everybody. The same thing happens with compositions when there are multiple writers. Does each writer, under copyright law, unless there's an agreement, each writer owns their own share of the composition in equal shares.
Mhm.
So if there's 5 writers, each writer owns 20%. Even if one writer wrote all the music and the other 4 wrote the lyrics,
Mhm.
if there was an agreement between them, it would say that the composer had 50% and the lyricist split the other 50% of the musical share. But without that agreement, then everybody gets 20%. So that's one reason to have some kind of written agreement, a split sheet. But again, if there's multiple owners, someone has to be given the authority to make a deal on behalf of that song. So even though one of the writers who owns 20% only owns 20%, he may control 100% because he has an agreement with the other writers allowing him to make deals on their behalf.
I would imagine most people don't have that, and it's the bro system. Like, oh, he's my friend,
Right.
and you really don't hear of a lot of problems arising because of this stuff, but they could.
They could, and especially if there's this is when money raises its evil head.
Yeah.
What do you mean you gave away the rights to my song for $1,000? Everyone I've talked to said it was worth $5,000. Where's my share of $5,000?
Yeah.
And of course, all the people he's talking to are also people who don't have agreements like this.
Right.
So the peer knowledge isn't always very good.
There's a lot of that going
There's a
around.
lot of that going on, and so I mean, look, this comes from my own personal bias and teaching classes on publishing for years and years and years, is that if you're a writer, you are, yes, you are a creative person. You are an artist. You're in a business. You need to know how the business works and understand how the business aspect of your art works so that you can make smart decisions and the right decisions with your co-writers, co-artists, anyone who contributes to your song. You need to be smart about this. This is a very, very complicated business. It's not just a matter of being in a garage with 4 guys and coming up with a tune. If you want to make money from your music, you need to understand the business just like anybody else understands the business they're in.
So many people do this. I don't want to know. It messes up my creative vibe. But the industry has changed and the bar has been raised.
Well, the bar's been raised, and look, if you really, really don't want to understand this, hire someone who does.
But until they're making enough money, they probably can't afford it unless they
That's true.
start out with some capital and look at it
That's
as a
it.
business.
That's it.
Let's listen to a song,
Okay.
and then we'll go back to talking about more of this stuff. And if you guys, I still do have a few more topics I want to cover, but if you guys want to start thinking about your questions, I'll let you know when to.
I see someone who's asking if anybody wants some bacon. I'll have some medium, not too crispy, if you don't want.
One of our regular viewers owns a restaurant, and he always tells us what the menu is that night while we're doing
Excellent.
the show.
Is it local?
No, it's not,
Oh,
unfortunately.
too bad. We could go over and have dinner later.
Someday
On him.
I'm gonna show up at his restaurant, and I am gonna do a show from there because it sounds good. And they always have the house salad and focaccia bread.
There you go.
Okay, this. Where'd my little cheat sheet go? Oh, the song is called Bang. And who is the song by? Let's see. The song is by the Walking Sticks. And Sophia told me that they are relatively new members and that it is dream pop. Where would we classify the music? What do you think we should concentrate our efforts on to improve our chances for placements? So that's what we're going to look at. Very high tech.
Very high tech, yeah. So,
The Walking Sticks doing their song Bang. Thank you for sending that in. I can't say that I'm an expert on dream pop. Do you know anything about dream pop?
not specifically, but but I know what I like. I mean, one of the things that I think I bring to some of our clients is that I've got a musical background. I think you do as well,
Yeah.
obviously. I'm not just a pretty faced lawyer. I actually know something about music. And so one of the things that I can bring to my clients sometimes is suggestions based upon music rather than just, well, it sounds nice or things like that. But I have some. I mean, I've got some comments on this song. I mean, I like the song. I think it's pretty good. I think it's mistitled.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely agree.
I think if you're going to say the phrase "I can vibe with you" 17 times, maybe that should be the name of the song.
Absolutely, and bang has a connotation of baboom,
Yeah.
and this doesn't baboom.
Yeah, I mean, going along with that, I mean, the dynamics of the song are fairly even until the very end after the second chorus.
Mm-hmm.
Then it starts to get a little more interesting dynamically, but up until then, it's kind of flat.
Yeah.
And so there's not a lot of dynamics. The couple of things I would recommend One is that the introduction's too long. It takes too long to get to the song, and it's a little hard sometimes to understand the lyrics. I think that the pronunciation could be a little bit better, and maybe it's because the harmonies are stacked, and maybe there's a little too much reverb on it, and that kind of clouds the pronunciation a little bit.
The song almost becomes more textural than
Yeah.
I know what the hell it was about. You had the lyric sheet, and I didn't want to go, hey, let me see
Well,
the
I've
lyrics.
seen the lyric sheet, and I'm still not sure what it's about exactly.
But on
Um,
the positive side, it's pretty and it's textural, and I could hear places where it could be used. I can think of scenes where it'd be used in film and TV.
Absolutely.
But it would have to be a textural use. This is, walking through Central Park after some heavy thing with your girlfriend.
Right,
It's,
right. Or the morning after.
yeah,
I mean, one thing, and I know you tell your members this, but for anyone who's not doing this, make sure you have an instrumental only version of the song, because the music editors are going to want to cut around it.
Mhm.
And even though this song had a lot of space between the lines, borderline too much space, but let's just leave it as it is, the music editors are going to want to cut back and forth between the vocal and the dialogue in the scene, and it may not fit exactly where the breaks are in the song.
Yeah, they may just want one lyric, one line of the lyric
Yeah,
that they would bring up
bring up.
for to punctuate what's going on in a scene.
But I know you haven't been to the road rally a few times. I know you tell your people that
We
make
do.
sure you have an instrumental version,
Yeah.
fully mixed, maybe even with a lead instrument or without a lead instrument in terms of the medley.
And watch the levels. Keep the levels the same so that they can cut back and forth. People
Right.
tend to go, my mix bus or my stereo out meters are now lower because there's no lead vocal, so I'm going to bring the master fader up to match it. Well, then you're going to have a discrepancy in level if you're cutting back and forth. So just mute the vocal.
Yeah, I
and
mean,
run
look,
the
if
mix.
if the editor wants it louder, the editor can make it louder on the dub stage.
Right.
But again,
Or on his laptop, as it
well,
were.
yeah, or on his phone, which is just crazy. But the thing a music editor is going to look for in a piece of music like this is the ability to move the lyrics around, move the vocal around, so that where there's dialogue in the scene, the vocal doesn't conflict with it.
hmm
And that's why you want an instrumental version, so he can do that and cut things around. Of course, you want all the usual bells and whistles. You want stems, you want time, things like that, so that the editor can just move things around as he needs to.
Yeah.
Once he decides that this is the song he wants to use.
And for those of you who haven't watched the show before, because we've talked about this many times, but stems are basically submixes where you might break out just the percussion or just the bass and drums. Another version that's just acoustic guitars or piano, so that they can basically reconstruct the song at the levels that it was originally intended, or affect the levels. So basically submixes so they can remix it during the show to work better with dialogue or the scene.
Yeah.
Okay.
Lawyer knows stems, everybody. Hey,
Yeah, that's pretty impressive, I gotta say, Steve. It is, because 3 years ago, nobody really used the word stems.
Yeah.
I'm so old that when I was doing audio post after the record part of my career, they were still using what they called they called them tractors. And they were dubbing machines that used 35 millimeter magnetic stripe
Right.
film,
Yeah.
and they would have 20 or 30 of them lined up on a wall with a kid that would run around and load these machines. That was the multi-track.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when you wanted stems from something like that, it was a pain in the butt. And they would advance and retard the gears, literally, like 1 click, 2 clicks, so to sync things up.
Right.
Nothing like it is today in the digital world.
No, I mean, one thing, especially young people are not aware of, Sgt. Pepper, which is arguably the best album ever, was created on 2 4-track machines.
Yeah. Were you at the rally? Yeah, you were there 2013 when we had Jeff Emmerich as our keynote.
Yeah.
Man, I had like a 3-hour dinner with Jeff Emmerich before the road rally just to get to know him before we actually went on stage. And I'm sure every time that guy meets anybody who's from our generation, they're like,
For those of you who don't know, Jeff Emmerich was one of the primary engineers under George Martin at Abbey Road and did a lot of the Beatles recording.
He started out, he lied about his age, got his first gig at Abbey Road at 15 years old, and within like a month, he was actually on Beatles sessions.
And not that this happens very often, but if you ever have the chance to see or see in person or see on television anything involving Sir George Martin,
Yeah.
An amazingly talented man who doesn't get the credit he deserves. He did a show for PBS a number of years ago on the making of Sgt. Pepper. And he would take you into the studio with two 4-track machines and show you exactly how everything was constructed. And it was just mind-boggling, the things that they had to do.
I read Jeff Emmerich's book. I've read it twice, actually, and I've got to say, for those of us who are engineer types, it really puts you in the control room, even better than any of the other Beatle books I've read. What I want to say one other thing about Jeff Emmerich, and I totally lost it. Oh, well. Moving on.
He'll be here on Taxi TV next week, so tune in, everybody.
I could actually get him on Taxi TV. He's such a sweet man that he would absolutely do it. I fly remote control planes on weekends, and he wants to go do that with me, although I've never bothered to call him on a Saturday morning and say, come on, Jeff. But he likes all things techie. He's a really good guy. Do you have an opinion on songs versus instrumentals? I get this question quite often. Which pays better over the long haul?
Well, songs, it's changed. It's changed. The performing rights organizations used to consider anything with a vocal to be a feature use, and so I got paid at the higher rate. Whether someone was singing it on camera or it was just a background use, but with a featured vocal. They've changed that, and now all background music is considered background
music,
and paid at a lower rate. And they got a lot of people very upset about that. People who would have song libraries as opposed to instrumental libraries took a huge hit. So unless your song is being sung on camera, it doesn't matter. Songs versus instrumental is going to pay the same.
So you might as well crank out a bunch of instrumentals because it's like half the work. You don't have to think about writing a lyric. You don't have to worry about the lyric being universal. You don't have to worry about the vocal performance being competitive.
Yeah.
There are a lot of things you don't have to worry about, and you can probably crank out, one or two instrumental cues anyway. Maybe not full-length instrumental, but 90-second stuff a day versus a song could take a week.
And the thing is, if you're going to do 90-second cues, as Michael has indicated, you want to do a number of different versions in different lengths. You're going to have a 90, a 60, a 30, a 20, a 15, a 10, and a 5.
Yeah.
Because the music editors will have specific needs for that type of thing. Think about, everybody thinks of score as long pieces of music under 1-hour dramas, but if you think about most of the sitcoms on TV, the score is really just used for transition between scenes. And it's somewhere between 2 and 5 seconds worth of music.
Yeah.
Now, part of the talent in creating a score for shows like that is creating a whole musical thought in 2 seconds, 14 frames.
And that a thought that it also conveys an emotion too.
Yeah.
Because it's got to carry you from one emotion in this scene to the next emotion in that scene and work well.
So it's very much a different talent than songwriting or composing for 1-hour dramas. Songwriting and composing for TV and film are very, very different talents. With songwriting, someone can complete the thought in however long it takes them to complete the thought. It could be 2 minutes and 10 seconds. It could be 3 minutes and 40 seconds. It could be 8 minutes.
Hopefully not.
Hopefully not. Well, only if there's a drum solo.
There you go.
With composing for TV and film, it's a very, very precise, calculated measurement. And the thing that happens for films, TV works somewhat the same way, is that the music editor will sit down with the director and the composer, and they will time out to the frame how long a piece of music needs to be. And film is 24 frames a second, video is 30 frames a second. So you will see things like, depending on whether it's TV or film, or video or film, this cue will be 28 seconds and 15 frames. And the composer has to write exactly that.
And match the tempo that works for the emotion of the scene.
Right.
And there may actually be hit points built in there, like footsteps. John Travolta in Saturday Night Fever walking down the
Right,
sidewalk. There are a
exactly.
million little nuances that go into the mechanics of those
Yeah,
calculations.
it has to match the visuals, the hits, as the composers and directors would call them. You have to see that, and so it's very different because when you're writing a song or recording a song, those elements don't come into play,
Hmm.
and that's kind of specificity.
Yeah.
And so it's a very, very unique and different talent. And the amount of pop songwriters who have transitioned to film composers is relatively small.
Hmm. It's, yeah, same instruments, same recording gear, but a whole different thing. I'm going to plug Robin Frederick's incredibly excellent book, Shortcuts to Songwriting for Film and TV, because it is. This doesn't talk about composing. This is not about instrumentals. This is about songwriting. And
Right.
songwriting for film and TV is a different discipline than songwriting for radio and records. And she's the only person that's written a book on this topic, which I do publish. I do make a couple bucks if you buy it. But as I always say, if you buy it and don't love it, send it back in resellable condition, and I will refund your money. I've never had one of these come back.
No.
But surprisingly, everybody, not everybody, more people buy her general songwriting book and think, well, and people love it. But I know how to write songs now. But writing songs for film and TV, I think, is actually easier.
Well, it's easier in a sense because it's generally shorter.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not under the pressure of three verses, a chorus, and a bridge.
Nor do you have to give the visual details like, she came up the creaky stairs wearing her pink polka dotted bathrobe that you might do in a country song where they want a lot of visual detail. And the world of universal lyrics in film and TV, she came upstairs sleepy. More general thoughts that could work in more
Look,
applications.
the visual adds an element that audio only doesn't bring.
Yeah, you
And
got to tell
so
the full story.
you're assisted by the visuals. So it helps you tell the story in less words and maybe in a shorter period of time.
Yeah.
And even, think of, I mean, TV theme songs have kind of gone away in many instances. Some of the dramas have them, and they're fairly short. Sitcoms don't have theme songs at all, hardly at all.
A couple of them do, but they're usually cool bands doing them.
Yeah.
Oh, what's the one that's like Friends, but with nerdy neuroscience or PhD guys?
Oh, Big Bang Theory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Bare Naked Ladies.
right.
Yeah. But
They
that's,
made more money from that than
Yes,
they probably
they
did in
have.
their entire career.
undoubtedly they have. But that is rare. And I think the reason that song exists is if you look at the opening titles, it's basically telling the history of the world in 30 seconds.
Yeah.
You can't do that with just visuals.
No.
You need music. You need words that people are unfamiliar with, scientific terms
Right.
that nobody knows until you go and look at the lyrics. But even, you look at a show like Frasier, which was so popular for so long, it had an end title song. At the beginning of the show, it had about 8 seconds of music.
Mhm.
That was a little bit different every time. And you would see the visuals of
That's right.
the Seattle Space Needle, and there'd be an elevator going up to the top, and there'd be a 5 or 6 second piece of music that would be a little bit different. The end title was the same.
And the intel was always, it was a jazz jazz piece, coffee, something to do with coffee.
Salad and Scrambled Eggs. Tossed Salad and Scrambled Eggs.
That's right.
By Bruce Miller and Dale Finnessy.
Very
Daryl
good.
Finnessy.
That's impressive.
Well, I know that because Bruce is a client.
Oh, there you go. You get paid to know
I
this.
get paid to know this stuff. But look, it's one of the most unique themes on television is the Seinfeld music. And
Jonathan Wolfe.
Jonathan Wolfe, who's fortunately also a client of mine and a good friend. And if you look at the opening titles for Seinfeld, what you realize is that it kind of sounds the same, but it's really sound design because it works in and around Jerry's opening monologue. And so you don't have spoken patterns that are the same length in every monologue.
Right.
So it can't be the same piece of music in every monologue.
So did he have a bunch of cues that the editor could then edit around Jerry's monologue, or did he actually score that opening monologue?
He scored it.
Okay.
He scored it.
And I'm telling you guys, if there is one person on the planet Earth that you should pray that if God forbid you die in your sleep tonight, tomorrow you reincarnate is Jonathan Wolfe.
Yes.
Because he's probably made more money than just about any musician on the planet, because everywhere that Seinfeld plays. I just had this talk with my wife, I think, in bed last night. We were changing channels.
That's too much information.
No, we were changing channels, and the Seinfeld theme came on, and I said, do you remember I interviewed that guy, Jonathan Wolfe, years ago? He's now retired, living in, like,
Louisville.
Okay, and he built a compound for the family, right?
Yeah.
He's got, like, his parents and his wife's parents, everybody kind of living together. And that guy will be rich for the rest of his life, and deservedly so, for writing the Seinfeld theme, because it's been 20 years in syndication, maybe?
25 since it went on the air.
Wow.
And probably 20 years of syndication worldwide. I mean,
we're talking millions of dollars.
We are talking millions of dollars.
Every year for the rest of his life, whether he works again or not. I
mean, give or take.
Yeah.
We're not holding any benefits for Jonathan Wolfe. Let's put it that way.
Right.
Johnny's doing okay.
Please tell him I said hi next time I talk to him. He's a great guy. Sure. He was very gracious.
He is a good guy.
Yeah. Okay, let's take some questions. Is there anything that I didn't answer? I'm not going to ask him what the industry is looking for right now, because he's out of the pitching side of the business, unless you can come up with a 1-minute answer for where, because everybody wants to know, where's it going? What should I be doing?
Well, I think a lot of the music supervisors are looking for music by actual artists, actual performing artists and touring artists, rather than someone who just has a Mac set up in a home studio and is a composer as opposed to an artist. Not that composers aren't artists in their own right, but it's not the same thing.
Do they?
It's because they're all looking for the next big thing.
Right.
I want to be the one who breaks this band.
Because exactly, there's they can hang their hat on, look how cool I am because I found that band.
Yeah.
And we both know from being in the industry as long as we have that there used to be this race to find the most obscure friggin' thing you could find. I'm sure we've both been to that showcase where you're standing up against the stage at the Roxy and you see 4 or 5 VPs of A&R, a couple of label presidents, and they're drooling on themselves, about to get into a bidding war over an act that guys like you and I would stand there and go, what the hell are they thinking?
Yeah.
Why is the industry obsessed with this obscure, it's not even music sometimes, and why?
Well, look, we're both musicians. I can only speak for myself. I know what I like.
Yeah.
I couldn't pick a hit record if it hit me in the ass. When I listen to the radio, and I listen, most of the time when I listen to music, unfortunately it's in the car. I don't have much time to do it other times. But I'll channel surf, and I'll hear some things, and I'll just go, really? That's on Top 40 radio? And of course the thing about Top 40 radio is that they don't actually play 40 songs.
Right.
The Top 40 radio playlist is probably 17 or 18 songs.
Yeah, and getting shorter every year.
So, I mean, for the past 2 weeks, I've had a rental car, and I've been forced to listen to FM radio, some of the things that were pre-programmed in, because I can't figure out how to do my own programming. But that's a lot of times in my own car, I'll listen to Sirius and I get to pick what I want. But I'm listening to Kiss FM, and I swear to God, it doesn't matter what time of day I'm in the car, I hear Blank Page by Taylor Swift. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter. I hear that song whenever I get in the car. If I turn on Kiss, it's on. And, it's not a bad song. It's not a horrible song. Honest to God, can't you play something else?
I know. I agree with you, although I've got 4 daughters, the youngest which is 14 years old. And as soon as she gets in my car, my wife's car, she takes control of the radio. So I hear a lot of what 14-year-olds listen to. And I've got to say, I've got a little hope that the stuff I hear, there's a little wider range, even though, yes, there's a lot of synthy, dancey pop stuff that all sounds the same, all sounds like Max Martin wrote it and produced it all over the radio. But every now and then, Lord comes along, or I'm trying to think of Ed Sheeran. There's a little more diversity now.
I got to tell you, and I've only heard two of this singer's songs, but Meghan Trainor
Mm-hmm.
has two songs all about that bass, and I think the other one's called "I Know You Lied Because Your Lips Are Moving." Your lips are moving, something like that. And these are fabulous pop songs. They're intelligent, they're well produced, they're well performed. They are really, really good pieces of music. And this woman came out of nowhere. I guess she'd done some writing before and had some hit songs as a writer,
Yeah.
but came out of nowhere as an artist. And she co-produces her own stuff.
And doesn't look like the typical svelte,
Yeah, well, and that's what all about that bass is all about.
Yeah.
Um, but these songs are well crafted.
Mm-hmm.
They're brilliantly produced. Um, and I'm tempted, hesitate to say this, I'm tempted to go download her album
Yeah.
just to have it,
But
because I think there's some really good stuff on it.
and the production, so some of the brilliance is the simplicity because
Yeah.
there's room for everything. By the way, speaking of production, I want to give a shout out. Do you know Rob Shirelli?
I do know the name. Yeah.
He's on panels every year at the Road Rally. I produced him in 1984. I engineered and co-produced some demos with him of his own stuff when he was literally just out of high school, I think. Anyway, I just found out this morning that my dear friend who lives 4 houses from me, and we spend every New Year's Eve and 4th of July together with our families, he finally won his first Grammy last night.
Oh, congratulations.
Well, to him, yes. Congratulations, Rob, for the Mary Mary album, which is a gospel album. The artist is Erica Campbell.
And her sister.
I think it's her husband, and they're called Mary Mary. And Rob
No,
has
it's
done
two sisters.
sisters.
Yeah, they're
Oh,
sisters.
okay.
Yeah.
And he's done like several records with them over the years, but because he only did 49% of the records, even though she won a Grammy, he didn't get one. Well, this time he engineered every song or
Right.
mixed every song in the record, so he ended up getting his first Grammy after doing this now for 30 some years. So
Yeah,
congratulations,
I mean,
Rob.
and again, when you start talking about different genres and how it's crossing over, I mean, Mary Mary is a gospel act, but they've got as many pop elements as anybody else.
Yeah.
It's really, really great music.
And they stay very current. And I think they're frankly very wise to work with Rob because he, he's got 75 or 80 gold and platinum
Yeah.
records with really big people.
And I think
he
Eric
brings
is,
that
I think
to
Eric
bear.
is doing a solo album,
Yeah.
a secular album.
Wow.
So that ought to be interesting.
Yeah, I'm sure Rob will do that one.
Those two girls can sing. They're neither one of them is named Mary, by the way.
Right. Ironically,
That's-
yes.
But nobody was named Jethro Tull either.
Really?
I know, hard to believe.
All right, let's take some questions from you guys.
I have no idea how this works, so I'm just going to sit back. And
Yeah,
watch.
I'm going to find some good questions and relay them to you. Gloria Covington says, hooray for gospel. Thank you, Gloria. Steve, are the topics you covered this evening in your book, Music Publishing, the Complete Guide? Good question.
Many of them are. There's a whole section on production music. There are sections on sync licensing for TV and film. There are sections on mechanical licensing, on copyright, on songwriter deals. So a lot of this, we've covered a lot of areas tonight. But one of the things about this book that I'm very proud of, I mean, it's being used as a textbook in a number of programs, but one of the things that makes it, I think, very valuable to songwriters and music business students is that there are a lot of sample contracts in the book, and they're all annotated. There's like a column of the text, and then there's a small column to the right where
Yeah, it's in reverse.
where it will describe what every paragraph means in simple language.
Understanding the why is so important.
Yeah, I mean, look, these contracts can be complex and difficult to understand, but if you get a little bit of explanation about them, you can understand what you're doing, at least enough to know what to do, or maybe more importantly, what not to do.
I cringe when I get the phone call from a taxi member. Or here's how it goes. We forward a piece of music to a highly reputable library because we only work with highly reputable
Right.
companies. So we forward a piece of music to them, and then I get a call from the owner of the company saying, "What's the deal? I can't get a return email or phone call from the artist you forwarded us, nothing." And I'll reach out to the member and say, "Why didn't you respond to them?" "Because I was afraid." "Why were you afraid?" "Because my friends tell me, all my musician friends tell me, that everybody in the music industry is just out to rip me off. And finally, I went to an attorney friend of mine who is my sister-in-law's brother, and he does real estate law in Terre Haute, Indiana. And he took a music law course when he went to Indiana, University of Indiana in Bloomington. And he says, this publisher is trying to rip me off because they want 100% of my publishing. And I just shake my head and cringe and go, I wonder how many taxi members over the years, it's got to be thousands, have passed up opportunities to make money doing what they love with reputable companies because some schmuck at band practice 6 years ago said every asshole in the industry is trying to rip you off. And then they went to
Well, let me make that story a little bit more personal in a way, and
Okay.
that is, you described going to a real estate lawyer in Indiana to review this contract. This is a very, very specialized industry. Music is all I do. There are a lot of lawyers in our industry, and that's all that they do, music. I wouldn't want to, I couldn't, it would be malpractice for me to defend you in a criminal action, to handle your insurance case, to do your divorce or draft a will for you.
I'm getting divorced?
Well, not until we draft your will.
Okay.
So we want to protect everybody. This is a very specialized business, and people who are not in this business don't understand what we do and how our business has terms of art that are unique to our business.
And things change rapidly now.
And look, I tell people, for those of you who are looking, you can't see me from below the waist, but I'm here in a t-shirt. This is how I go to work every day. And I'm in jeans and tennis shoes. This is what music lawyers look like. If you talk to a music lawyer in a tie, he's a divorce lawyer whose nephew was a bass player.
Right.
And that's his connection to the music business.
I'll take it a step further. Most music attorneys I know don't know the first thing about production music libraries or the film and TV. They only know film and TV from a Michael Jackson song getting licensed for a film.
Yeah.
They don't know it from the perspective of somebody that does instrumental cues or some little indie band or artist. They just don't know. They don't know what the norms are.
It's just a very specialized business. So if you're going to seek advice from somebody, try to find someone who knows something about the business. It's a very complex business. Yes, there are a lot of people who are looking to rip you off, but if they really want your music, they'll make a fair deal.
Yeah.
But you have to know what to ask for to get a fair deal. When I'm representing composers with major studios, I've done enough of these deals that I've got relationships with a lot of the major studios, and they know what I'm going to ask for, and they know what they're going to give me. And so instead of getting the grade C contract, which they would give to someone they don't know, I get the B or B plus or A minus contract because they know I'm familiar with the industry terms. They know we've negotiated before. It just cuts through a lot of the crap because if I ask for A and they've given it to me in the past, they just put it in the agreement first time around. So it saves the client money, saves everyone a lot of time and effort, but they have to know that you know what you're talking about or be represented by someone who knows it.
And you have to be representing somebody that gives you that negotiating leverage you spoke of earlier. I don't think that the people watching the show who've never had anything, substantial going on for themselves could hire you and they were offered $1,000 sync fee for this piece to be in a TV show that you're going to get them $2,000 because they hired you. Maybe
sometimes that happens, sometimes it doesn't.
Or they may just move on to the other $1,000 person, depending.
But sometimes it's not always just about the money.
Yeah.
Somebody wants to use your song and they tell you, great, we're going to use your song. And what they send you is a work for hire agreement. So now they own your song. Instead of you licensing it to them, you're selling it to them. And you don't even realize it.
But you still are keeping the writer's share.
You're keeping the writer's share, but you've just sold half the income. And for the same amount of money where you keep that half of the income that you just gave away. Because if you don't understand what the contract says, you're going to give away rights that you don't think you're giving away.
So, first step, buy the book, read the book.
Live it, learn it, love it.
That's right. Okay.
No, we've even got an endorsement already. What a great book to own. Thank you, Kenneth.
just bought your music publishing book at Amazon. I love that.
I'm hearing cash registers go off.
That's right. He's upgrading his car on the way out of the taxi parking lot. Okay, I'm looking for questions. Okay, question. So when you sell your work as work for hire, you're giving away the publishing income you can receive on it?
Basically, you're giving away the ownership and you're giving away the publisher's share of income. Um, Even in a work for hire agreement, there should be some language that says that you, as the writer, are entitled to collect your money from ASCAP, BMI, or CSAC, your performing rights organization, because nowhere in the Copyright Act is the phrase writer's share ever used. The ability of the writer to collect from their PROs is based upon contract.
Mm-hmm.
So it has to say that you're entitled to collect your money from your PRO.
Are the PROs going to go away in time? I know that there are people that would like to see that happen.
I don't think they're going to go away. I think they're going to change considerably.
Are they going to be given more power, more far-reaching? Like we're not only collecting the performance royalty, but we're collecting other things for you as well?
Well, the Copyright Office, Maria Palante, who's the Register of Copyright, just put out a 245-page report.
Days ago, right?
Which I recommend to anybody who's having trouble sleeping. But that being said, Ms. Palante has offered some very forward-thinking proposals for the music business. And one of them is to expand the ability of the performing rights organizations to become music rights organizations.
Okay.
So all of you are familiar probably with ASCAP, BMI, and CSAC. Some of you may be familiar with the Harry Fox Agency. Mm-hmm. Harry Fox is a company, nonprofit organization that represents publishing companies for the issuance of mechanical licenses. In other words,
which means when something is actually
licenses to CDs and downloads. Right. If we flash forward 100 years,
yes,
licenses for CDs and downloads. ASCAP, BMI, and CSAC can't issue those licenses. They're not allowed to by consent decree. Maria has recommended that all of these organizations be allowed to negotiate, collect for a variety of rights.
So it gives Harry Fox
potentially more income, more chances to get into the performing rights area.
So that will piss off ASCAP, BMI, and CSAC. On the other hand, they get to put their hand in the Harry Fox pocket and collect on mechanicals.
And right now, the performing rights societies are very, very restricted in what they can do and what they can charge because of certain court decisions and Department of Justice decrees that came down 70 years ago, which needless to say are a little bit out of date. And there's been a battle to try to get them changed. The DOJ is looking into changing them, mm-hmm. and Maria has come out with some very, very strong language saying this needs to be changed. This is not an industry that existed 70 years ago. We need new rules and maybe even less rules. So I don't think the PROs are going to away. I think they are going to, 5 years from now, look very, very different than they look today.
I think I tweeted last night when I was reading some of Maria's report, and I tweeted something to the effect of, I hope this changes faster than the tax code has.
We're hoping so too. I mean, one of the interesting, it's more than just the PROs. It's licensing for the internet. It's the disparity between what record companies are paid and publishers are paid for streaming. It has to do with analog, terrestrial radio stations paying performing rights to artists, which they don't do. Digital stations do.
You're talking about performing rights as in I'm the singer on the song, therefore I should get paid something because my song is on your radio station versus what the songwriter gets for the performance.
Exactly. Right now, the artist and record company don't get paid for that on terrestrial radio. Under some strange thinking, there are certain services, even digitally, that don't think they have to pay for recordings before 1972 because they were not protected by federal copyright. She is looking to give what she calls full federalization, which means give copyright protection to all sound recordings, which means that the digital services will have to pay, which they haven't been.
Wow.
And that all terrestrial radio will have to pay, which they haven't been. So this is some pretty forward thinking. The good news here, look, the bad news is that, every congressperson has a radio station or television station in their jurisdiction.
Mhm.
That is going to be against some of these things. The good news is that this is not a Democrat versus Republican issue. It's nonpartisan. So if we can get enough smart people to realize the injustices that have been going on for many, many years, maybe we can change some of this and artists can start making a living again.
Aren't the radio station conglomerates going to have the money for lobbyists versus, well, I mean, the musicians have ASCAP and BMI as lobbyists in their corner.
Right.
Versus, I won't name the conglomerates that will have lobbyists arguing the other side of the case.
It's going to be everyone here over 21. It's going to be a question of whose dick is bigger. That's what it's going to come down to.
That's a first on Taxi TV, but that's all right. I said asshole before, so
it's part of it is money, and part of it is just finding people that will listen to a reasonable argument that makes sense, because all of this makes sense, and the music business is in need of a severe overhaul in terms of licensing and pricing and things like that, and everything that Maria Palante has suggested, with rare exception, benefits artists and songwriters, and less benefits the users of music, the broadcasters, the radio stations, the streaming services, et cetera, et cetera.
it's confusing to me, and I've been in the business for 40 years. Keith Lynch asked a question before. I thought it was a good question. It scrolled off the page somewhere, and somebody's saying, Keith, ask your question again. I will attempt to scroll up, although sometimes that can be flaky. Yeah, it's being flaky. I get to a certain point and it gets all weird. Yeah.
Go Maria. There's one thing there.
Yep. Keith Lynch, what did you want to know?
Well, there's a question here about a song getting licensed to a supervisor on a non-exclusive deal, and whether the song can be licensed to anybody else. And that's an excellent question. Most sync licenses are non-exclusive, so you can license it for an episode of Scandal. You can license it for an episode of NCIS. You can license it for a commercial. Where exclusivity starts to come in, and this is very limited areas, in the commercial area, where if you license a song for, let's say, a soft drink, let's say Rockstar. Hold up the can, Michael. Brought to you by Rockstar. Perfect. The sponsors will want what they call category exclusivity. So if you license to Rockstar, you can't license to Red Bull, but you could license to Chevrolet because they're not in the same category. And that's usually the only place where exclusivity comes in.
Keith Lynch, here's the question he asked before. I'm getting a lot more forwards, meaning from Taxi presumably. What's the normal wait time to receive a call from the company that my track was forwarded to?
I wish I could say there was an answer to that question, but there isn't, because even if a track gets forwarded, it may not get used. The show may not go on the air for 2 or 3 months.
What about if it's getting forwarded to a library? Back when you guys were still in the library pitching side of things.
It could take years. We've had deals where our agreement with the artist is actually expired, but somebody remembered the music and wanted to use it and came back to us to try to license it. And we worked out a deal with the artist, who was no longer a client of ours, and said, we got this into the hands of the production company. Can we go ahead and license it? And our deal remains in effect for this song. Everything else is free to go.
I would imagine they would say yes.
They typically do. It's almost impossible to tell. It could take, no less than 90 days. That's for sure.
I think he's more interested about knowing what libraries, unless I'm misinterpreting what he's asking, but when Taxi forwards your piece of music to a library, a music production company, our members get pissed off that they don't hear anything for 30, 60, 90 days, sometimes 6 months or a year, and they don't renew their Taxi membership because, hey, you got my stuff to somebody, they're not interested. And lo and behold, 2 years after we sent it to the library, they get a call. So I think he wants to know what's the normal time range, and an addendum to that question might be, Why does it sometimes take a year for a library to reach out to a composer that has been sent to them through a filter?
Um, there is no specific time frame. Again, if the library can't get it placed for whatever reason, then they're not going to contact you. Um,
No, even just to put it in their catalog.
in theory, here's the scenario. Okay, you've submitted your song to Taxi to submit to production libraries. If Taxi submits it, it's presumed that you're going to approve it being put into the library. And so they just assume everyone who submits music to them wants to be in their library, and they're going to take it and use it or not use it as they see fit. The approval is assumed. They may not get back to you right away. Again, libraries get hundreds, maybe thousands of pieces of music per week. It takes a while for people to go through it and decide if it's something that they can use. And it really doesn't matter. Strike that. It isn't always a matter of whether it's good or not good. It's really, is it something they can use?
Mm-hmm.
Is it something that fills a niche that they don't already have? If you're a writer who writes songs in the style of the Foo Fighters, and they already have 8 bands that sound like the Foo Fighters, they don't need your music. They already have music like that. So sometimes it's just a matter of the right time, right place. And I wish I could say there was some kind of finite answer on this, but there really isn't.
I completely agree. It frustrates me, but I agree. Let's find another one. I had nearly 60 forwards at Taxi and never heard back from any of them. I even submitted work from platinum producers I was managing to see what the deal was. I still haven't heard back from any of them. Um, yeah, it's not our fault. We're submitting it to those entities that have asked for music.
Look, the function of Taxi and the function of any pitching and placement company is to get the music in front of the decision makers. After that, the company loses control.
Yeah.
They can't force someone to use it. They can't say, well, what do you mean you're not going to use a song? This song is perfect. If they didn't think it was perfect, they wouldn't have forwarded it to begin with. There's too many cooks that have a decision-making capacity in music.
And the fact that this isn't the first person that has said, I submitted stuff that, so and so who worked on the Foo Fighters record, engineered and produced this stuff. That doesn't mean a hill of beans. It's not like somebody on the receiving end is going to go, oh my gosh, look at who produced this. We better get this placed right now.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the decision-making process has just become more and more complex. For TV composers who used to submit theme songs when there were theme songs, you would submit it to the producer, and the producer would say yes or no.
Mm-hmm.
Now it goes to the producer, the executive producer, the head of music for the studio, the head of the studio, the music department for the network, the head of the music department for the network, and then the head of the network. None of which know anything about music.
Right.
So the process has just become more and more complicated, more and more elongated, and more people sticking their nose into places that they really don't have any place being, but they're in a position of power, so they get to do that.
Is it true that every piece of music that gets used on every show goes through that many people?
Not every piece of music, but every theme does, and quite often, songs that are placed at least get up to the studio music department level.
Right.
Even if it's, or the network music department level.
And is that because of a creative decision or because it makes their department just aware of what's being used in the show and they're looking for some sort of consistency, or they're looking for, put it this way, I know that, yes, if something gets used on a show on NBC, it's going to make it up to like Allison Schneider,
right.
Because she's got to make sure that that bass player isn't coming out of the woodwork. But does she also have creative?
Yes, absolutely.
Input? Okay.
She absolutely has creative input. They know what they want their shows to look and sound like.
Mm-hmm.
And so the same way they will give notes back to the production company, to a director, and say, we don't think the scene is working, we want you to change the dialogue and reshoot it, they will do the same with the music.
Good to know.
And that's what has made this business so complicated and so hard to deal with in some ways.
Why do we want to be in it?
Because we can't do anything else.
Good good call
I know
there.
I can't.
Um, I'm looking for another question. Somebody's got to have a good question. Pedro Costa says, "Yep, I've lost 3 themes so far because of that process. Got dropped after the creatives, i.e., the network heads. Yeah, everybody. It is true. Everybody wants to have an opinion,
Well,
and
and there are things that are out of your control. I had a composer who um, was hired to write a spec theme for a TV show, and everybody loved it, and it went up and down the ladder, and everybody loved it, and the show was being produced by Quincy Jones, who realized he has a son who's a musician.
mm,
Boom, my composer's off. QD3 is now the composer of the theme song.
wow,
You can't fight genetics.
no,
That's, you can't fight that. Nepotism raises its ugly head all the time. This is what happens. Um, but there's nothing you can do about it.
is there a resource available to research up and coming TV shows or TV shows working on going into production? Yeah.
The Variety and the Hollywood Reporter have production reports that come out once a week. They used to be in the printed version. I think now they're only online. So if you subscribe to either Variety or the Hollywood Reporter, they will have listings of films in production and TV shows in production. And sometimes, if it's far enough down the line, it will even list who the music supervisor is.
Right, and then you can chase the music supervisor.
And if you can't find it there, sometimes going on IMDb and looking up that particular show, again, if a supervisor's been named, they may be in the credits for that show, even the show hasn't gone into production yet.
I have a theory, and my theory is because we do research like that. We actually had my daughter doing research like that. I think over last summer.
Again, nepotism raises its ugly head.
Well, yes, that's true. But we had somebody that did it, and they left the company. And my daughter, she didn't come to me for a part-time job. I knew she was capable of doing the job and doing it well because she's also a musician, and she did a spectacularly good job. And here's what I've come to learn, which is you're almost better off looking at the historical use of music in a show if it's like 3 seasons old or older, because there will be a sonic musical footprint kind of, and you can almost predict what kind of stuff they're going to use and what kind of scene. Whereas if it's a new show that's going into production in 3 months, 6 months, or 9 months down the road, all bets are off. Everything is a guess. So even though you might be the first one in the door, and you might, by some act of God, get the music supervisor to say, sure, go ahead and send your song over, by the time they actually need the music and get the notes on what they need after doing the spotting, that music is probably long forgotten and irrelevant.
And that's great advice, because the thing that music supervisors hate more than anything is getting music that has no relation to their program.
Their immediate need right now.
Yeah. Or just their overall need for the series.
Yeah.
If you write country western music and you want to submit to Nashville, good choice. If you want to submit to CSI, bad choice.
And if you're going to submit to Nashville, you'd be really smart to watch the show. I can't tell you how many times people, I hear this from supervisors. I hate musicians who hand me a piece of music. I don't watch your show, but you're going to love my song.
Right.
I think Maureen Crow mentioned that on stage at the Road Rally. But if you're really smart, you'll watch Nashville and you'll know the characters and know that Juliet does the same, a similar, fairly narrow range of material.
Right.
From episode to episode. So what would she normally sing about? What key might it be in? What's the band complement? Is she going to do more traditional sounding country stuff that's got a lot of pedal steel and fiddles, or is she going to do stuff that sounds a little hipper and more modern?
And Nashville's kind of a unique example because they have the artists re-record all these songs. They're all recorded for the show. So the demo, if it's well produced, it doesn't have to even be fully produced, they can take the demo and craft the song the way they want to, as opposed to most shows who license music. They want fully produced masters because that's what they're going to put in the show. So it has to be well produced. It has to be sonically very, very strong, and be master quality.
Okay, one more question because I just realized we're an hour and a half into this show. Where are all the questions? Russian roulette chat questions. Yeah. Question: if I license my song exclusively, can I still put it on my CD and sell it on iTunes? That's a great question.
It is a great question. Most production music houses, even on an exclusive deal, will be exclusive for pitching to TV and film.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of times the artist will still be allowed to um, put the music up on iTunes and sell it through various venues, either CD or the hard copies, or digitally, and be allowed to stream it. What you need to be careful of, again, if you're licensing the music to the production music, you have to be careful of who is collecting the publisher's share of income. Because if they register the song and they are the publisher, and your music goes on Spotify or Pandora, they're going to be listed as a publisher, and they will get the publisher's share of income, even though they had nothing to do with your putting it on Spotify or Pandora.
So how do you do that? If they've got an exclusive deal for film and TV and they're the publisher on that, is there any way to... This is why retitling was invented, kind
Yeah,
of.
it is. It is. It's problematic. It is problematic. I guess the good news, if you can call it that, is that Spotify and Pandora pay so little that it's almost meaningless. What you really want to do is make sure you can sell, CDs off the stage or digital downloads, because that's really where the money is. Streaming to this date is still in its infancy. I'm not overly optimistic about it at this point in time. It is the wave of the future, for better, for worse. Download sales are way, way down. Streaming uses are way up, even though streaming income isn't way up.
And theft is way down because of streaming,
Yes.
making it so easy to consume music. And I think I saw a statistic recently that YouTube is still the biggest source of streamed music, or the biggest purveyor of streamed music.
It's where most people go to find music.
Yeah.
So that's still there. So they're paying royalties through ASCAP and BMI, CSAC, as does Pandora, as does Spotify. So there is some money to be made there, but there's a new increment of currency. We used to say the music business was a penny business, because for a long time the royalty for mechanicals was 2 cents, 1 cent of which went to the writer. Now we talk about it being a micro penny business.
Yeah.
Where you will see a stream on Amazon on their free service being worth 5/100ths, strike that, 5/1000ths of a cent. And on the paid subscription service, 25/100ths of a cent.
I can't even imagine. Do you know, probably 12 to 15 years ago, if you guys Google this, Google the Lasco model, and you won't find a picture of me in a bikini. You will find an article. I think I was interviewed by Newsweek magazine, and I explained the Lasco model was a penny per spin for streaming, that eventually people wouldn't want to own stuff on a drive, but they would want to get it through an account wherever they were. If I go to your house for a party and I want to pull up my playlist, I can. If I'm in my car, and get my playlist. If I'm on my mobile device, etc., etc. And I think I stipulated in the Lasco model that that the artist would get a penny a spin, and I got so much hate mail for a penny a spin.
Because people thought it wasn't enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the artists are getting more than the writers and publishers. Artists are probably getting somewhere between 1/3 and 1/2 cent per stream. The record companies and artists, and they get a lot of that gets paid.
But the record companies aren't giving that money to the artists, I hear.
They are sometimes. What they're not giving is a share of the advances, which they never ever did. And in some ways, more importantly, they're not giving them a share of the equity stake they have in the streaming companies.
Right. Yes.
Which is just money in their pocket.
And they were smart to make those deals when
they were smart to make those deals, but not to the artist's benefit.
Yeah.
When Beats got sold, I mean, and this is not a label. This is just an individual. LeBron James did a commercial for Beats.
Mm-hmm.
In exchange for doing the commercial, he got a 1% stake in Beats.
Mm-hmm.
So when Beats sold for $3 billion, LeBron James made $30,000.
No.
Yeah.
1% of.
Maybe it was less than 1%. Anyway, he
Okay.
made $30,000.
Okay,
because
yeah,
of
because
his
that'd be like a tenth of a
because,
percent.
because
or
of his
100.
equity stake in Beats. So they gave him a little tiny piece to do a commercial for them. What's been happening for years now is that the streaming companies, in order to get deals with the record companies, have been giving them equity shares in the company, which does two things. One, it fattens up the record company, but also doesn't really give them incentive to charge higher rates.
Right. They're only hurting themselves.
Because they're only hurting themselves.
Yeah.
And so when these companies get bought and sold, as they all do, the record companies walk away with big bags of money, and the artists don't get any of it.
Revolt. Break out your pitchforks, kids.
And don't
All right.
forget your torches.
That's right, damn it. Well, this has been highly educational. I'm glad we finally had a chance to have you come over and
My
do
pleasure.
this.
Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you for showing up. Once again, buy this book. Seriously, you guys, you need to know about the industry that you want to be in. And, just, it's all in here. Okay, I looked at it over the weekend. It
Good.
is all in here. It's very comprehensive. Thank you very much, Mr. Steve Winogradsky. And we will see you guys next week for
Thank you,
another.
everybody. Thanks for tuning in.
Yep, another exciting episode of Taxi TV Live. Bye, you guys.